Gambit Chads, welcome to round 5 of my I Am Norm journey in Charlotte. We're coming off a round that was quite a wake up call for me, and things would not get easier because in this round, round 5, I'm facing FIDE Master Isaac Wang, who, as you can see here, finished with the second highest score in the tournament. I won't have the exact scores posted, but you can infer from that. 2377, and his birth year on FIDE is 2009, so he's 13 or 14. 2377, and he's been rising a lot. I mean, you could say it's because of K40 or whatever, but you need those performances to get the rating that high, and very, very strong player. So tough test for me in round 5, and also tough because as we've discussed, well, first of all, I'm looking over at the times right now, and I showed up 3.5 minutes late to this game, so that's not a great start. But also tough for me because I probably don't want to play like closed Sicilians or even like open Sicilians, which is games that I have a lot of. Those are lines that I have a lot of games in the database. And we've seen the difference with good preparation, being able to, know more than your opponent about the line, being able to make them play stockfish, and vice versa happening in the last round. So it was really important for me that I got it right this time. And even if that meant going a little offbeat. So this is the first time in a classical game that I have played the Alapin variation. Pawn c3 on the second move of the game. And yes, not as common as knight f3, probably about as common as knight c3. But yes, of course, we were trying to play d4 and take the center and support that. And here black has two main moves. They have d5 and knight f6 to challenge against white just taking the whole center, like if black kind of just hangs out. Then d4 and white as will have an advantage here. If d5, then pawn takes, queen takes, d4. This is a lot of theory here. White is generally just going to play knight f3 castles, and I mean the theory isn't like generally considered too sharp. There's some ideas of like knight a3, knight b5, and maybe looking at that square a little bit, but these are just generally considered some pretty tame positions and not much of an edge for white. But my opponent plays the knight f6 line, which is actually what I tend to play as black. And I knew this, and I think I had some pretty good preparation. And part of the reason why I actually chose the Alapin variation is because I was looking at my opponent's games, and I thought this was the weakest part of their repertoire. Out of any line I could play, I thought that this was the line, and specifically the Alapin line that I played, that they knew least. That I had not really seen them play it completely correct in a game. And so that's kind of what I was doing. I was really like scanning the repertoire, trying to find a whole like I'll play anything as long as you don't know it. So knight to f6 here, attacking the e4 pawn. So we can't go d4 just yet. So e5, knight d5, and now we go d4. Knight d5 being the square, abiding by the rule that I like to make clear, which is that when knights are on their standard development squares, if they are attacked by a pawn from the center, they tend to really want to go to the square the pawn was just controlling, which you'll note is this d5 square. And also, furthermore, if they can't go to that square, like even imagine like these moves had been included. Furthermore, if they don't have access to this square, then they might not have access to any good square. For example, knight e4, this knight can get trapped if it gets encased behind the pawn. Knight h5, it can often also get trapped here with like g4 once that square is under control. And knight g4, it can also get like chased to a very unpleasant square, like a trade on h6 happening or something like that. And otherwise, like it would have to go back to g8. So, and also with the knight not blocking the queen's path, these aren't even options. So really, that square needs to be available. And if it's not available, then this is really something to look for. So that's an important strategic point to keep in mind in general. So knight d5, anyway, d4, we've got to complete the process of that. Pawn needs to be doing something useful. Takes d4, knight f3 is a little something you can do because d takes c3 is not possible. That knight is unprotected due to the pin. My opponent continues developing, and bishop to c4. So this is a little bit of a gambit. The main line continues with c takes d4, and after d6, then bishop to c4. Attacking the knight. D takes e5 is a move. Knight b6 is the main line. Bishop to b5 to create a little bit more of a stake there. D takes e5 is played, so is this move, bishop to d7. but d takes e5, knight takes e5, often bishop to d7. Often white can maybe grab a little bit of a bishop pair, but in general here this is totally fine to play for black. This pawn is well blockaded. The light square bishop can be bad anyway behind this pawn, and it's a tiny edge that white can play with. In the game, that's not really what I wanted to go for. And specifically, that was actually a line that I acknowledged that my opponent knew very well. But it's this move bishop to c4, which can be kind of tricky. Because so it hits the knight to b6, of course, gets out of the way with tempo on the bishop to b3. And so now this is kind of a fun line because it's a gambit. I have actually not recaptured cd4 yet. My opponent played the correct move, which is d6. And if they play d takes c3, then after knight takes c3, this can be a really rough situation. This is not a good gambit to accept if you're black, I believe. So some of the issues here include like e6, then just bishop to f4 can really lock that pawn down. For example, there's like bishop c2 and queen d3 issues there. This knight can come to d6. a4, a5, as you know now, is a bothersome idea. And specifically, this idea to free yourself up a little bit can also kind of... It's just hard to get out of the center with white's pieces just in general being so active and all of these guys being bunched up. So d takes c3 is not considered to be a good option, but d6 or d5, generally they both transpose into the same line. Pawn takes d6 is played. Also, if that had gone to d5, this would not be good for white. It's important to note. Black here can play a very good version of a French by getting the bishop on the other side of that e6 pawn instead of it typically being locked away. So now, like, you imagine some passive move to protect this. e6 here, black is in excellent business with two good bishops instead of in the French where one of them should be bad. They got on the other side of this door, so to speak. So that really can't be played. So if d5, e takes d6 has to transpose to the game, which it did. Queen takes d6 and castles. So capturing on d4 is a bit of another option, but castles is what I wanted to play here. And now this is kind of interesting because bishop to e6 is the main move. And it's the best move, and it's the one that maintains equality. And you'll note right now the engine is at 0.0, or it might be 0.1. But bishop to e6 is the best move. Because, so if black here plays e6, first of all, dc3 runs into some, I think it's just, yeah, like knight g5, nice move, targeting this, e6, and like queen h5. Basically, like, black's king is in the center, right? Black's king is in the center, and this can be very, very awkward to defend everybody. So if they just play e6 to try to finish their development, then the issue becomes after like c takes d4, bishop e7, and just some simple development here, they've locked this bishop in. They've locked this bishop in, and so this is a pretty healthy advantage for white. They're just kind of playing e4, and this bishop can come out, and in general everybody's good because that's kind of frustrating their position, and maybe eventually we can play for this d5 breakthrough. So you don't really want to play e6. You can't play bishop to g4 because of this nice nifty trick of takes, and you can take that bishop when there's no knight or anybody to protect it. So that's a nice little nifty trick there. Bishop to e6, this trade would be very good for black, right? And this bishop's scope was pretty bothersome. Here I was planning, so this is a line takes, and like knight takes d4. There's some theory here, rook to d8. Black in general is fine. They should be able to play g6 next move, castle, and they should be doing okay. White never really generated a ton of counterplay on their king. It's a little tricky, though, because you do have to kind of keep your king in the center for a little bit if you're black here, because you keep not really wanting to play e6 because you don't want to jam in that bishop yet, so you can't really finish your development fast. But then at the same time, you have to make sure that your king's not getting punished for staying in the center too long. So, with this move bishop to e6, I was planning this line knight a3, which is quite sharp. The idea is, like, of course, knight b5, hitting the queen. a6 can be complicated if this file opens up. But yeah, knight b5 hits the queen, and then maybe like bishop to f4. Maybe we can get that pawn back. We're looking at knight c7 ideas. We're looking at using all these files, and because the king's still there, right? So dc3 proposes the queen trade, and now here black's up a couple of pawns. And I believe the move here is queen to e2, dodging the queen trade. Bishop takes b3, hoping for after the simple a takes b3 to just play the calm pawn to e6. But I believe here white includes knight to b5, hitting the queen. Now there's queen b8 or queen to d7. And queen b8 I think is much better. I think the issue with queen to d7 is that the bishop will come to f4 and the rook will come to d1. and it's a pretty fun line to play if you're a Gambit man like myself. So that's a pretty good one. I think Queen B8 is best to maintain equality, and there's like yeah E5 or something very very precise like this. There's a lot that you need to know if you're black here to hold the equality, and it's in general I think pretty fun to play for white. But they can't play this at the top level because they don't get any edge, and of course any super grandmaster will tell you that this is just prepped to a draw. But it's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting, like if they would just play e6, okay, then you can get your pawn back. And otherwise takes b2, with bishop takes b2, then you're operating along here. Now it's even less likely that they'll get this out. I think black has already blundered. So it can be pretty tricky for black to play with. I think there's some other nice lines where you play knight takes c3. Like for example, a6, you can play knight takes c3 and try to play b4, b5 to bother them. But just really anything before they're able to achieve this. Anyway, interesting positions. My opponent might have known bishop e6, but might have also known that they don't know it well enough to play. And so you can see based on our times and me arriving 4 minutes late, this is a 90 plus 30 game. So we get 90 minutes each, 30 seconds are added to our clock for every move we make. No second time control, that's all you get. So you can see we've been playing pretty quick. My opponent makes their first think of the game, thinks for about 5 minutes, and plays bishop f5, which is a line. Bishop can't come to g4 because of this, right? And bishop doesn't come to e6 into the theory. So knight to a3 is not going to be as good anymore with d takes c3. There's no real bishop trade. This pawn can just kind of push to e6 after dodging this. And so it's also like bishop d3 can come. So can't really do the same. However, what we can do, as opposed to with bishop e6, where black would make an excellent achievement of that trade, right? So for example, bishop e6, if I were to just grab that pawn, then black could trade here, not even fish for this, but really just e6, rook to d8, bishop e7, castles. This pawn would be not in a good spot. I would be left with this bad bishop stuck probably defending that for the rest of the game while they enjoy this excellent outpost. But keeping the light square bishops is a good thing for me. Bishop to f5, and so I'm happy to grab d4. And I think this is a key decision that I'm proud of. Not c takes d4, the obvious choice, but actually knight takes d4, because it's better to have this position rather than knights on the board, because this knight is an attacking knight. This knight is a defending knight. So, of course, I'm happy to trade these off, because only one of those types of pieces can move, and the attacking knight is the one that can move if it wants to. The defending one can't. And it can also get pinned again at a later point after, say, like e6 and castles. So I'm very happy to make that trade, and there's another good reason why we swap the knights off that you'll see in a moment. So e6, knight c3, bishop e7, just some normal stuff here. And now I think this is also a good move on my part, this move queen to f3. So queen to f3 serves a couple points. Number one, I am actually, yes, looking at that b7 pawn. And for example, if queen takes d4 would just be a big mistake. This is not a good trade. One of our queens are in hot water, and it's not mine. In fact, my queen is excellently placed, stopping castles because of this issue, and black needs to spend at least one tempo solving that, and after which any number of hits on this queen get very, very annoying. For example, knight b5, like seriously looks at knight c7, right? So any number of those hits look very annoying. They don't have access to bishop e4, so this would be a very, very bad trade for black, and in general, that's not a pawn that can be a really testy pawn to take. I might like offer that in general, right, with all these rooks coming to the center and all these other ideas of hitting the queen. In the game, black castles, which is the correct thing to do. Not queen takes b7 in this position, though. Why didn't I play it? I believe at minimum black can play rook fb8 and queen takes d4. Yes, rook fb8 and queen takes d4. This is what I was looking at in the game. And now, so it's a little bit different. Their king is now castled, right? So any hit on this queen, they can just move. And I did also kind of open this up for them. They can play a5, a4, and just generate some threats here. So I wasn't like super keen on making that trade. Besides, I had bigger plans for this d pawn, and it is this move d5. So with this move d5, so actually, to be clear, my only prep, I want to be clear about where my prep starts and where my prep ends. My only prep was with bishop e6 here. I had not prepared anything else. I think I saw my opponent play bishop e6 in a couple games and didn't really know it very well. So that was my tension there. So bishop f5, we're both in unfamiliar territory. So in this position, I was already thinking. As you can see, my time goes down. Knight takes d4. Spent about 11 minutes there. Takes. So we have this position, and I play d5. So d5, yes, I'm happy to trade off this isolated pawn in the middle and maybe make a big explosion around their queen that hopefully maybe my rooks could have some fun with that. Also, this pawn is unable to be part of any trades at the moment without that bishop hanging. So they have a couple issues, and I'm also still looking at this pawn. Queen d7, which my opponent played, solves most of their issues, and you can see they're already kind of a little bit on the back foot on the clock, which is another point in my favor here. And I think this decision is a decision I regret a little bit here. I played bishop f4 because I didn't want them playing e5, and I really did want to finish development. Bishop f4. It's not a blunder or anything. It's not even labeled an inaccuracy by any means. You can see my advantage fall a little bit by playing this move bishop to f4. I mean, of course, I want to activate my rooks and everything. I think a little bit better would be following. There's games here. I'm opening the Masters database right now by Ponomaryov and Tivyakov have both won in this position in 1998 and in 2021, respectively. And both of them played this move d takes e6. And with d takes e6, after bishop takes, we can play bishop takes, and probably not queen takes. Or, I'm sorry. We don't want to make that capture. If we make this capture, then I believe just f takes e6 and black is honestly quite fine. Actually, I'm sorry. Yeah, f takes e6, black is honestly quite fine. Like we have this isolated pawn, but in general, like we open this file for them. They're no worse developed than we are, and they can play knight d5. Like we have this one weakness, but it's the only thing we have going for us, and we're not going to win the game off of really just one weakness. So I wanted to play a little bit more dynamically than that, and so did Ponomaryov and Tivyakov. So rook to d1 is what is what they played. This isn't what happened in my game. Queen c6. This isn't actually an endgame that Ponomaryov won if black plays queen c6. Because trade, and now you're talking about two weaknesses. So there's a Ponomaryov game in this position where he just outplayed his opponent, dealing with principle of two weaknesses, right? Just bishop e3, rook c1, knight e4, all that good stuff, blockade them, pressure, and just outplay them in that endgame. So I think that provides white some winning chances. There's also this line queen c8, so bishop takes e6. So it's like, where else can the queen really go if it goes to c7? And she wants to hang on to b7, right? If they go to queen c7, then bishop f4 is a problem with tempo. So queen c8. Now bishop takes e6. Now f takes e6, and we've included these moves, right? Queen takes e6, I think, is really just hanging this pawn largely. I mean, I don't know if it's hanging the pawn, but it is something white can take and generally get away with, and I think play for a win in this position. Oops. Sorry, I'm muting my phone now. Typically, I remember to do that. F takes e6, and this is Tivyakov's game, and he played this move. Oops, I just clicked on it. He played this move here, queen to e2. And this is a better situation than the other one. You got the queens on the board. Black's queen is poorly placed, blocking this, and in general tied down to the e6 pawn. So I think this provides white good winning chances, and of course, that's not a hot take. Tivyakov won this game. So I kind of regret not going for that and creating an actual weakness in my opponent's camp. But I didn't really I didn't love the idea of just forcing f takes e6 and opening that up, especially if they were able to trade off the light square bishops. So I played bishop to f4 to keep a little bit more on the board. And my opponent, I think, responds accurately by trading everything here, which is not an obvious thing to do, because now you've got both these bishops screaming down. And this was something, of course, I was looking at when I played bishop to f4, both these bishops screaming down, and I really do want to take b7. You also don't have rook b8. Taking away rook b8 was something I thought was quite important. You don't have rook b8 to eventually win back b2, so this is a very, very serious threat, and black finds the best way to deal with it, which is bishop to g4, hitting my queen. If I can play queen e4, but then we just repeat. I wanted to defend the bishop, but not only that, I want to keep attacking b7, right? So I don't really just want to go queen c4 and then allow my opponent to just bring their rooks in. So bishop to g4, I didn't want to just repeat moves with queen e4, bishop with queen here, queen here. So I played this move queen b3, which is also part of the plan when I played bishop f4. So we're shifting over a little bit, and we still have some nice targets to look at. So I was, in general, quite happy to play this position. My opponent plays bishop e6, which is good move, and reintroducing the possibilities of before. And another possibility that I have now, in addition to taking e6, I of course can't move the bishop without losing my queen, is this move queen takes b7, which I thought was pretty interesting. After queen takes d5, queen takes e7. I think the big issue here, it looks like it grabs a pawn. There's really no other option black has, right? They never have rook b8 in any line. Takes, but I think they have this move, queen d4, attacking here and here, and I didn't really see how I could play for a win in something like this. So I'm trying to give myself winning chances. Again, bishop takes e6. It's playable, but I believe here, I think my biggest issue is even with queen takes e6, queen b7, and bishop f6, something like this, yeah? Yeah, f takes e6, I think I'd be more happy playing this, because I think my rooks, again, come with tempo, and this looks nice, like they come to the d file, they come to the e file, and I think in general this looks better than the position when we had the knights on the board. or when they were able to swap queens. I think swapping queens is something that was good because this is an aggressive piece and this is a defensive piece that really can be hit. But this move queen takes e6 really did it for me. This was not an endgame that I felt I had serious winning chances in. That came with tempo on my bishop, just because it's just one weakness, and they can defend just one weakness. So with queen takes e6, I can't really take on b7 without bishop to f6, and I didn't really love this one so much. I'm seeing plus 0.4 here, but in general, this is really sniping down against me, and I think black's rooks will activate quite well here. I mean, it is something I could have gone for, but in the game, I was more tempted by rook to d1, simply activating my rook, trying to play rook takes d5, trying to bring them all into the game. I'm really looking at quick activity here, and then maybe just trying to play rook d7, right? So instead of just kind of trying to find a way to fish a pawn, if I could just build up a very good position, I think that's a much more practical decision here. It is something you see that I spent a ton of time on. I think, speaking of practical decisions, I think keeping just making a decision here with just like rook d1, just feeling the position would have made more sense, trying to keep more pressure on my opponent's clock, given that they're the one that has to defend. So they play here bishop takes d5, rook takes d5, and so I am starting to feel pretty good about this, because if they do get like a move and are able to bring their rooks into the game, then of course it's equal, then because we're just trading rooks. But I am still here on the front foot, and they do have to defend this b7 pawn because of rook b8 being taken away. They'll always have to defend that. So queen c6 also allows me to have rook c1. So that was another appealing feature of me playing rook to d1, is that I saw in this position that I'd have rook c1, bring everybody into the game with my bishop defending that. But my opponent, again, responds quite accurately. So queen c6, they continue their maneuver here with this move queen to f6. So attacking my bishop, and it was not something that I thought possible initially, because I thought this move bishop e5 would be very effective against this, and just really trying to take b7 next. If they play here queen to b6, I believe, yes, sorry, rook to b5 was my point. Rook to b5 and then just taking b7, right? So queen b6 I thought was not possible, but the point of queen f6 is very subtle. Rather than going queen b6 immediately, queen f6, bishop e5, they have queen b6 now. Rook b5 is not as good because of queen h6, so they drew the bishop to e5, initiating the tempo on c1, and here they're all right. They're able to just kind of play b6, because if rook c7, they can play rook c8, take advantage of some back rank ideas. So some interesting stuff. So for example, takes here I can get mated, right? So some interesting stuff going on, to be clear, right? So if they went queen b6 immediately, here I believe I'm winning this pawn. Even if they attack my bishop, I can take this pawn and just be up a pawn. But they have queen h6 if they've drawn my bishop to e5, tempoing my rook. And they are just okay in a position like this, because they can just play b6 next turn after I move my rook. So interesting position. Bishop to g5 was another thing I was considering. After queen to e6 here, I can't take b7 as well, because rook b8, my queen needs to stay tethered to the rook, and unfortunately that is not possible. I was looking at this as well in the game. Queen takes e7, queen takes d5, I'm just down, and queen c6 would lose the game immediately because of this move, and taking c1. Actually, did I miscalculate this? I think. No, it's -3. I just now noticed this bishop. Queen takes e6, f takes e6. Very testy stuff. Yeah, it's just a lot of things hanging, and they could take b2 at minimum. And now they don't have back rank issues. So very interesting stuff here. I was really... this is like trying to squeeze water out of a stone, just trying to get an advantage in this line. Eventually, I'm realizing nothing works. I was also trying to make this line work, and just trying to double and invade rook d7, but they're able to play rook d8 in all lines and successfully challenge. Again, I can't trade everything and take b7 because they will checkmate me on d1 at the end of that. I don't have h3 included. And so with my back rank issues being an issue in a lot of lines, I just played this move g3, which is a perfectly fine, perfectly solid move. It's also the kind of luft you'd like to create in this position, because we do have dark square bishops, and so the light square luft could be the safest option. If I play your h3, that could be taken away at any moment. So g3, I mean, of course, it defends the bishop, and it's probably the type of luft I'd like to make for my king to take this away. But as you can see, my time is getting way too low as I try to find absolutely anything to get any edge to play for something. But I think my opponent continues to play solidly with this move b6, now solving the issue on their b pawn with a very solid move. None of their pieces are tied down to that anymore. And after rook c7, which is a very logical invasion move, trying to make something happen. I mean, I could play bishop to g5 and trade bishops, but it really continues to give me nothing as I play rook d1, and they're able to play rook d8. So I play here this move rook to c7 trying to invade, and they play bishop to c5. Very nice move. Very nice post for their bishop that they've actually created here. Yes, I've gotten good stuff out of my rooks as I finish the invasion here, but the engine continues to read 0.0. My rooks look quite good. They're attacking this, and my opponent plays a5. But they've now created a very solid setup here, and this bishop is actually aiming at f2, which is a little bit uncomfortable for me. You know, for example, if like this rook is able to invade, or if like or the queen, or if anything's able to invade. But anyway, the bishop is a very well posted piece, and it's a little frustrating for me because I'm looking at black's whole position and there's just nothing to attack. There's like none of these things I can attack. I've put in all the pressure in the world on f7. Simply the rook just hanging out there is too sturdy of a defense. I'm not able to make that rook move because they control that diagonal, and the bishop, defends everything else. I didn't see how to make any threats, and so I offered this queen trade, queen c3, and my opponent correctly declines it. I think if my opponent accepts this, then this might give me some actual winning chances, because these are dark square pawns, and if I'm able to kind of lock my pawns on light squares, then I can propose a bishop trade at the right moment and use the fact that my rooks are much better than their rooks. And when I propose this bishop trade, then that pawn's a target, then maybe that pawn's a target. Maybe my king can be an additional asset in this sort of endgame. I think it was very accurate of my opponent to decline that and realize that really, honestly, their king is more safe than mine. Like, checks here are possible against mine, and really with them, like, I just have nothing. I have nothing to break through. I propose another queen trade. They again decline, making a threat on a2. And at this point, you can see I made that move with 17 seconds. So at this point, I'm getting like a little bit nervous, and I'm realizing I have actually no way to seriously win this game. And I think I make a good practical decision here in view of a2 being threatened, and also queen e1 check being a threat, queen e1, f2 hanging. If queen f1, there's bishop takes f2, right? So I don't want to start being on the back foot here. I play this move bishop to e3, which I'm quite proud of. Trading the dark square bishop is probably worth the cost of a pawn. So for example, you can imagine the line queen takes a2, takes. Of course, I'm not going to play rook takes c5. I'd just be down a pawn. But any move like queen c3 or b3 here, and this is like dead equal. In all likelihood, all these are getting traded off. If I were black, I might just play this move a4, because my pieces are just so good that something like rook c8 will always be impossible due to tricks that I have, and I just simply have enough resources to eliminate this pawn if I need it. So, and I attack f7. So this is certainly sufficient resources for white, and not an actual pawn advantage for black, just because of the excellent positioning of my rooks. And trading off the dark square bishop was really the one good thing they had in their position. So with bishop takes e3, queen takes e3, they take on a2. I take on b6. This is probably a little bit of a quite similar version, honestly, although they were happier to go into this one because it gives them this check on b1. And I play king g2 and just offer a draw. And my opponent accepts. It has been triple zeros for a long time at this point, apparently, and not that either of us knew that. But with queen to e4 check, we can make a draw like this. I could play this move f3 and queen e2, queen f2, and black honestly could probably even accept and draw this game, but I think most stingy is just to move somewhere. And again, like, I can't go too far without dealing with some issues on my own king at this point. Trade f2, a4, a3. There's just nothing. There's nothing left for me to win this game. I had no, like, I kind of talked before about the concept of tickets to win, giving myself something to work with to win this game. Like, we look back at the Ponomaryov game, for instance, and how he was able to play here d takes e6, and he gave himself kind of these tickets to win this game by trading, and gave himself two. By the time the dust settled, there were two weaknesses here. Or in the Tivyakov game after queen to c8, this was kind of my sorts of takeaway here. After f takes e6, he plays queen to e2, so he's created a weakness, but the dust hasn't settled, right? I think he's created a weakness, and still would argue he has a development advantage in this position. The queen on c8 is a little bit awkward, right? So we can see how this game continued actually a little bit. It was queen to c4, rook to e1. I guess queen takes e2 is not really possible because that hangs a little bit, and this rook will come to e1 very quickly. So in the game, we had rook d8, and then you just grab this pawn. So rook d8, yeah, I think if you're black here, I don't know what you do about this. Probably trade, king f7, bishop comes out, rook comes to e1. So this is like, also a nice way to play. I mean, I gave it my best shot. I tried to keep winning chances where possible. I'm not sure I missed something so serious here. I think the engine's top recommendation being bishop, so g3 was possible. Yeah, bishop to e3, I think, gives me the best winning chances. This was something I was looking at. Bishop to e3, I think, prevents black from really consolidating. I really wanted to keep my foot on the gas pedal to stop rook c8 or rook d8. But bishop e3 keeps this solid. It takes away bishop c5, which is something that allows black to really, really breathe freely with bishop c5, a5, because then everything's protected. But if they just kind of play something like rook d8, I mean, it's very possible. But there is rook c7 now, pressure on a7, which is very serious. Then there's no a5 at any moment, right? Because we have the pressure right there. So bishop to e3, I think, is a very important prophylaxis point against a future bishop to c5. But not that it's a huge advantage or anything, but I think it would keep the game going and try to continue with invading the rooks. But honestly, I played this pretty well. I don't regret, giving the draw in this position. I was absolutely not playing for a win at that point. Really, I don't think either side were, and I didn't want to risk anything. I was in a very good spot in the tournament, and against such a strong opponent, 2377 and rising kid who had played very well, and me being quite low on time, I was okay with that result. I'm typically not someone who likes draws or likes to settle for draws. I like doing anything I can to win games, to squeeze every last ounce of water out of the stone. But yeah, this was a hard fought, pretty balanced game. I think I got like a little bit edge out of the bishop f5 thing, but my opponent in general played really, really quite well from there. So yeah, so I still have to have a plus score in this tournament from there on. We now have 4.5 out of 5, which is very, very good, but you still need 7 out of 9 at minimum, and that still requires winning more games than you lose. That requires 2.5 out of 4. So stay tuned for how we were able to make that happen. And yeah, thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.